Alright everybody, good morning. I wanted to do this quick video about the gun sanctuary and constitutional carry movement that's been taking off lately because we could all use some good news, and I for one find it extraordinary to see law enforcement officers advocating for the Second Amendment rights of the citizens in their community. So to be clear, the gun sanctuary movement is led mostly by law enforcement officers or sheriffs who are pushing back against gun seizure laws passed in liberal population centers like Chicago and Seattle. And I have to say, honestly, that this is very surprising to me. I did not have the impression that police officers were gun rights advocates. In fact, it seems that I've witnessed more often than not them fighting against the Second Amendment rights of citizens, especially when it comes to concealed and open carry rights. But maybe I'm wrong. So seeing this whole movement happen has made me think about the fact that there's obviously a diversity of opinion amongst law enforcement officers in America when it comes to the gun rights of the people they serve. And for those of you who are thinking about where you want to live in this country, you might want to consider the attitude of the local law enforcement, not just the elected officials. So I wanted to point to a couple of YouTubers who have been talking about gun sanctuaries and constitutional carry states, two totally different things, as I will get to later in the video. One of these YouTubers that I really liked is named Laurel. That's the name of her channel, and she did a video called The Second Amendment Sanctuary Rebellion. I'm going to link it below, and I highly recommend that if you like my videos, you check out Laurel's. She does really good analysis of the possibility of civil war, and I find her conclusions to be very grounded in research and practical observation of current events. She also has a son in college, so she relies on him to get a point of view of, millennial, Gen Z age people as well. So it's very interesting to listen to her videos. So anyway, I'm just going to play you a clip from her video about the Sanctuary Rebellion here.
This is happening very quickly. Each of the news article refers to other jurisdictions where this is happening, and none of them seems to include them all. The journalists can't keep up with how quickly the Second Amendment sanctuaries are appearing. There is a key difference between immigration sanctuaries and Second Amendment sanctuaries. In the immigration sanctuaries, the local elected officials are telling criminal law enforcement not to share information with immigration enforcement. This makes the enforcement of immigration laws more difficult and expensive, but it doesn't halt it altogether. In the Second Amendment sanctuaries, the enforcement of the gun laws in question are being halted altogether. The ante has been upped. This is not only the people refusing to comply with the law. It is their local elected officials and police who are refusing to comply. They are passing local laws that intentionally conflict with state law. This is an organized rebellion with a government component. The immigration sanctuaries are too, but this is an important escalation. The fact that this is happening so quickly should get everyone's attention. 2 or 3 jurisdictions announced that they would rebel, and within weeks, dozens of other jurisdictions announced that they would rebel also. The speed with which the Second Amendment sanctuaries are appearing, as opposed to the immigration sanctuaries, which took decades to gain widespread acceptance, that speed is a manifestation of the intensity of the mood in rural areas across the country. These jurisdictions, which include their police and elected officials, are jumping at the chance to rebel. Now, I am using the term rebellion. It is not a full-scale rebellion on all fronts. The localities are not refusing to recognize all jurisdiction of the states. It is only a single issue. But the inclusion of local government and police in the rebellion and the communication and coordination among the rebelling jurisdictions is possibly the beginning of a parallel government or organized non-state. It might not develop into anything more than it is now, or it might.
Now, since Laurel made this video, the sanctuary rebellion has continued, and I did some research to find if there's an updated list of sanctuary counties, and the best one I could find, believe it or not, was on Wikipedia. The map's okay. It's sort of weird because they put some of the constitutional carry states on here, and that's a totally different thing. But the list is pretty comprehensive. It breaks it down by county. So, for example, 38 out of 64 counties in Colorado have adopted Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions. 65 out of 102 counties in Illinois. And most extraordinary to me is New Mexico. 25 out of 33 counties, 6 cities, and 1 town have adopted Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions. And also 30 out of 33 county sheriffs have signed a letter by the New Mexico Sheriff's Association vowing not to assist in enforcing certain gun control. These sheriffs consider themselves to be a part of something called the Constitutional Sheriffs Movement. So here in the Las Cruces Sun News, the headline is, "What is a Constitutional Sheriff? Movement fuels debate in Santa Fe on guns and policing." Mark Cage's authority as Eddy County Sheriff and his duty to uphold the United States Constitution supersedes any other law enforcement or legislation, if you ask him. He's part of a national movement of county sheriffs that call themselves constitutional sheriffs, which means they enforce constitutional law over all else, despite what kinds of political ties might roll into state or local government. Even federal law enforcement like the FBI would have to bow to Cage's jurisdiction in his county, Cage said, but he doesn't believe the movement is partisan or about separatism. It's about defining a county sheriff as more than a police chief or a top cop. They are elected, and Cage said his only duty as sheriff is to the needs of his constituents and their rights under the Constitution. Cage said all of his deputies are also sworn to the Constitution above all else. A debate centering around New Mexico Senate Bill 8, which would call for universal background checks for gun buyers in New Mexico, ignited a fervor among county sheriffs who said such laws are unconstitutional as they infringe on Americans' Second Amendment rights, the right to keep and bear arms. The bill was passed by the New Mexico Senate on Friday. The conflict around guns brought the concept of constitutional sheriffs to the forefront of the discussion, as many criticized the legislation and said they would not enforce it in their counties if the bill was signed into law. The term is, in my opinion, a little redundant, Cage said. I took my oath in 1982. That means I swore to protect the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. They're God-given rights. It's not just a matter of believing it, it's law. The sheriff is the top law enforcement official in the county. Without having to answer to a city council or mayor, Cage said his post as sheriff has more power and he intends to use it to represent only the needs and interests of Eddy County citizens, not a certain political ideology. I take nothing away from my brothers and sisters in the police. They all have bosses, Cage said. I don't have to worry about that. I answer for what I've done every 4 years. So the other thing that I found was this organization called the Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officers Association, and they are based out of Arizona, but they are a national organization. And just look at their statement of positions here. I'm not going to read all of it to you, but they take very strong positions on immigration, that it's not just the responsibility of the federal government, but the responsibility of the state governments to enforce immigration. Not just the responsibility, but the right of states to enforce immigration laws when the federal government fails to do so. So that's pretty awesome. And here they're talking about asset forfeiture, which is, it's shocking to me that there's this whole organization of law enforcement officers arguing against the policy of asset forfeiture which is a source of income for a lot of law enforcement in the country. So here they say, every year, police and prosecutors across the United States take hundreds of millions of dollars in cash, cars, homes, and other property, regardless of the owner's guilt or innocence. Under civil forfeiture laws, the government can seize this property on the mere suspicion that it is connected to criminal activity. No charges or convictions are required. And once property is seized, owners must navigate a confusing, complex, and often expensive legal process to try to win it back. Worst of all, most civil forfeiture laws give law enforcement agencies a powerful incentive to take property, a cut, or even all of forfeiture proceeds. They go on to say, civil forfeiture laws pose one of the greatest threats to property rights in the nation today. They encourage law enforcement to favor the pursuit of property over the pursuit of justice, and they typically give the innocent little recourse for recovering seized property. And without meaningful transparency, law enforcement faces little public accountability for its forfeiture activity or expenditures from forfeiture funds. So the asset forfeiture is relevant to our Second Amendment rights because our property rights, when it comes to the ownership of guns, is part of our right to bear arms. So, and then of course they go into the Second Amendment, and that's probably the strongest part of the statements that they make. They're opposed to universal background checks because we know background checks are a vehicle for registration, and registration is something that always precedes the seizure of guns. And the seizure of guns is something that always precedes or often precedes genocide. So if you would like to, I'm going to leave a link to this organization below. Another cool thing about it is that you can vet your sheriff. They also focus on education and educating law enforcement officers about the Constitution and about how to protect the citizens' constitutional rights. So now I personally am going to vet my county sheriff, and I'm going to approach him about joining the constitutional carry movement if he hasn't already. He has an open door policy where you can go right to his office, or you can call or email. So that's my plan, and I encourage others to do the same. We have to remember that these are our elected officials, and regardless of their current political positions, they'll be held accountable every 4 years. So if your local sheriff isn't standing up for your constitutional rights, then advocate for a new candidate who will. Now I'm going to move on from this county rebellion movement to the constitutional carry movement, which has happened on the state level and has taken place in right-wing states rather than states, meaning right-wing states that aren't dominated by liberal population centers like Colorado was dominated by Denver. And Gun Rights Watch has a great map where you can see it all laid out. And so for those of you who don't know, constitutional carry is a term used to describe any form of loosened gun restrictions where no permit is required to possess or carry a firearm, whether carried openly or concealed, whether loaded or unloaded. So basically these green states are generally states on the map here are generally states where you don't need a permit to own or carry a firearm, and these orange and yellow states are places where there will be a vote soon. And then the article breaks down which states are likely to pass constitutional carry legislation and which ones aren't, even if there is a vote. Sadly, the red states are where nothing has happened, and my home state is one of those red states, even though there was a constitutional carry bill that was up for vote. But that's another long, sad story about how neocons don't really care about the people. So one of the best examples of constitutional carry states is Missouri, actually, which recently passed several bills that actually ban the enforcement of federal gun control laws by federal or state law enforcement officers. So this means the feds can't come into Missouri and confiscate weapons or enforce any other federal gun control laws without breaking the laws of the state of Missouri. This is very different from other constitutional carry or permitless carry states, which merely decline to prohibit the right to carry a firearm without a permit. So by English common law, if it doesn't say you can't do something, then you can do it. So Missouri goes a step further and bans the enforcement of gun control laws. So here's a really good video about what happened in Missouri from a YouTuber called High Impact Flix. And it looks like, I'm going to play you an excerpt from that. It looks like he took the video down, but somebody else backed it up, or maybe this is his backup channel. I'm not sure, but I'll link it below.
While the political parasites in New Zealand seek to take everybody's guns away, there's a state in the United States that seeks to criminally prosecute any federal agent who wants to uphold federal gun control laws.
Missouri may have just made the most monumental step toward freedom and individual liberty since the signing of the Bill of Rights. In a 23-10 vote by Missouri's state Senate, the state passed a bill that would nullify all federal gun laws and regulations and make enforcement of those laws by federal officers within the state of Missouri a criminal offense. Like its predecessor, SB 613, Bill SB 367 and its companion, House Bill HB 786, would prevent all state agencies and their employees from enforcing any federal law that infringed the Second Amendment in any way, including gun registrations, fees, fines, licenses, and bans. Originally authored in 2014, a former version of the bill was also passed but vetoed by then Missouri Governor Jay Nixon. A stipulation of the newly passed bill states, all federal acts, laws, executive orders, administrative orders, court orders, rules, and regulations, whether past, present, or future, which infringe on people's right to keep and bear arms as guaranteed by the Second Amendment to the United States and Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution, shall be invalid in this state, shall not be recognized by this state, shall be specifically rejected by this state, and shall be considered null and void and of no effect in this state. For added measure, SB 367's authors went into great detail on what federal laws will be considered null and void and of no effect. Any tax, levy, fee, or stamp imposed on firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition not common to all other goods and services which might be reasonably expected to create a chilling effect on the purchase or ownership of those items by law-abiding citizens. Any registering or tracking of firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition. Any registering or tracking of the owners of firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition. Any act forbidding the possession, ownership, or use or transfer of a firearm, firearm accessories, or ammunition by law-abiding citizens. And any act ordering the confiscation of firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition from law-abiding citizens. This language is designed to guarantee that the measure can't be worked around or misinterpreted by legislators or law enforcement agencies. This is an example of pro-gun legislation with teeth.
So I'm no expert on this sort of thing, but again, I've never seen anything like this before, where a state has said, not only will we not enforce federal gun control laws, we're going to make it illegal to enforce those laws. Now the question is, will Missouri law enforcement officers actually enforce these laws against federal officers? Hard to say. Missouri law enforcement actually opposed this bill heavily, but still, since they have to break their own state laws in order to enforce gun control, I think it's safe to say that they're unlikely to help the feds. And then that's really the most important part of federal law enforcement. The federal government simply doesn't have the manpower to enforce federal law without the help of local and state officials. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to point out was that the city and county gun sanctuary movement that I talked about before has begun to spread outside the liberal states that have red flag laws. A series of counties in eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina have passed gun sanctuary legislation. So I would encourage you to reach out to your local sheriff, even if you live in a conservative state, and encourage him or her to stand up for your constitutional rights. All right, everyone, that's it for today. Please like and share if you like my videos. It really helps to get the word out there, or hit the subscribe button. You might also want to check me out on minds.com or BitChute, where I'll be uploading all of my content soon. If you'd like to promote my work on a freer platform, I really support that. Okay, God bless everyone, and have a beautiful day.